slowly but surely, the national team, which was going through its roughest period at the time, there was actually an evening joke. It was called unattached FC because at the time Canada had a lot of players that were without clubs, and the players that were with clubs, like I said, there were 29, 30, 35, third division of Finland, fourth division of Germany, second division of US. It was rough.
Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod, and you also welcome to our World Cup preview. I'm sat here with Thomas Nef at the moment, from among many things, from a Northern Football podcast and other publications. So welcome, Thomas. Thank you for coming onto the show. Much appreciated. How are you doing today?
Annie, I'm doing great. 18 days to the World Cup. Could be excited to join you here and to be at the tournament in Qatar. The first one there in that part of the country, in that part of the world, excuse me. But no, should be excited to chat some Canadian soccer, which has been a much awaited anticipation for 36 years for a lot of Canadian soccer fans.
I can imagine so. So talk to us then. Like, how are you feeling about Qatar? How did they get to? What was the journey to Qatar in terms of qualification? How did that pan out?
So basically, the whole journey starts. So there's a couple phases, right? I mean, nothing happens overnight. It's kind of a long story, but I will try my best to simplify it. So I would say there's a lot of key players right now in the national team that debuted under two managers previous to Herdman. One was Benito Floro in 2015, 2016, and the other one was Ottavio Zambrano. That's when this whole process started, I would say, because at the end of the day, they started to debut younger players, and they started to slowly but surely kind of but they started to try younger players, and then the older players, replace them one by one, such as maybe the backup keeper, Maxime Crepeau. I remember 2017, that's when Alphonso Davies debuted under Zambrano, Mark Anthony Kay, Sam Akube, for example, he debuted under Benito Floro. Junior Hoylett, they convinced him. Benito Floro convinced him when he was playing in England. They brought him over. He was still undecided if he wanted to play for Jamaica. So slowly but surely, the national team, which was going through its roughest period at the time, there was actually an evening joke. It was called unattached FC because at the time Canada had a lot of players that were without clubs, and the players that were with clubs, like I said, there were 29, 30, 35, third division of Finland, fourth division of Germany, second division of US. It was rough. It was a rough period. You really struggled to find consistency. There were some good players, some in MLS, some in some good first divisions, but it wasn't enough. It was around 7 or 8. So clearly Canada could not compete in CONCACAF, and there were some disciplinary issues as well that a lot of people kind of keep hush-hush, because at the time, obviously, they didn't have the kind of media reception that it has today. I remember back in March of 2021, I was on a Zoom call, and there was 11, 12 of us. Today, I was on a Zoom call where Canada just dropped their squad for a friendly against Bahrain, and 64 people were on it. I mean,
64?
64.
Oh, wow.
And March 2021 was 11 or 12. So we're talking about an increase of 600%. Of course, a lot of them that joined were international media. But nonetheless, I mean, you can really see how a lot of interest is finally taken up. So obviously, besides those two managers, Benito Floro and Ottavio Zambrano, then comes in John Herman. I think he does the real change. I think it was already gearing towards, getting rid of, older players and identifying new players. But when John Herman comes in charge, he completes the process of guys like David Witherspoon getting nationalized. He's currently playing in the Scottish Premiership, for example. He identifies Liam Miller, who at the time was Liam was playing for Liverpool's U23s. So, I mean, he wasn't even a professional. And now he's in Basel, so he identifies him. He debuts as well, Jonathan David. He debuts as him. So enters John Herman, and he obviously starts to identify more and more players. And it's not just him too, but his assistant Mara Bielo, who at the time Canada's youth national teams unfortunately did little to no scouting, and basically would pick 7 players from the Montreal Academy, 8 players from the Toronto Academy, and 6 or 7 players from the Vancouver Academy, Vancouver Whitecaps, that is. And they would bow out the U20 tournament, the U17. And Bielo is the one that started that process. I'm guessing probably in the orders of Herdman, that, hey, let's look at other players. And then I'll never forget this, the speech that Herdman said. We need to look at non-linear pathways. So if you look at the national team, and I think Canada is very unique. Canada has 4 different ways of developing players. The Canadian Premier League is the 4th one, the 4th and last one. But up until now, we haven't had a player from the Canadian Premier League join. There is one, Joe Waterman. He's currently with Montreal. He's still debuted. He's been called up twice, one to the taxi squad and one to the actual squad. And he has a real chance of being in the World Cup, but he hasn't debuted yet, so we can't count him on yet. But Canada is unique because obviously you have the 3 MLS clubs. So through those 3 MLS academies, you have some big, chance to develop them into first team players. Then there's also the NCAA system where players go, they do well in college and then they sign for American teams or Canadian teams. And then there's the European system, of course, where players like Jonathan David, even Samuel Piet, they'll go directly to Europe. And try and make it out there and see what happens. So it's been a really, really interesting, very, very interesting kind of mix in that way that Canada has been able to get players in 3-4 different ways. Even Lucas Caldini, for example, he was
playing over in South America, wasn't he?
He went to Nacional. And then he played for Peñarol, then signed in Liga MX, and then they actually brought him back as well. Thomas Zambrano went to Uruguay and he brought him back because obviously he got cat-tied to Canada in the worst way possible, an 8-1 loss against Honduras. So so I think Canada has come a really, really long way, and with Herdman, it expedited the process so much because he really believed in younger talent.
Do you feel that it's like a snowball effect, I suppose, that as Canada get better as a team and become, I guess in the next few years they'll see themselves as having a more realistic chance of competing for future major tournaments, or at least qualifying for them, and therefore do you feel that makes it more attractive for dual nationality players who might be looking between one country and another, because ultimately they also have split nationalities, but they want to play in the biggest tournaments, and maybe if Canada is more likely to give them that than perhaps in recent years, do you think that makes a difference?
100%, absolutely. I mean, the national team used to be an obligation, not an obligation, but optional.
Sure, yeah,
exactly. It's something that you just kind of did. Now it's just like everybody wants to be there. To give you an example about this, there's a player in the Whitecaps. He's actually Scottish. His name is Ryan Gault.
Yes,
he's been living in Canada for 2 years. So according to FIFA law, he would need to play 3 more years, so a total of 5 years before he can be eligible for Canada. He came out the other day and said he would join Canada. I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy.
He's had a fascinating career because obviously he went to Sporting Lisbon's academy at a really young age. Spent a couple of years in Portugal. So he really has sort of taken quite a
and what's interesting is that he, being an MLS All-Star, he could actually play for Scotland. Like, he's good enough to play for Scotland. Like, at least as a depth player, because at the end of the day, most of Scotland's national team, unless you're playing for Celtic or Rangers, most of Scotland's national team is playing in the championship, right?
Yeah.
So I think the MLS has gotten to a point where, you're at the championships level, I would say, for the most part anyway. Obviously, the top clubs in the championship are better than the best clubs in the MLS, but on average, I'd say it's pretty even. So for someone like him, comes from a footballing nation of over 100 plus years, to come and say that after just living in Canada for 2 years, speaks words. There's some truth to that. And I think Canada is starting to identify more players.
Yeah, it's certainly looking very promising. So and obviously John Herman, obviously because he'd spent time with the Canadians women's national team, so I think having that experience of managing it internationally has probably put him in good stead for this tournament. What did you think? 'Cause obviously he's not, he's an Englishman. He made probably an unusual transition from the women's international game to the men's one. Like, how have the Canadian media and the public viewed John Herdman since he took charge?
Yeah, John Herman, he had a kind of a tough kind of first period having the job because it all came at the expense of the previous manager, Octavio Zambrano. He made a lot of mistakes, some which unfortunately cannot be said, but he made a lot of mistakes. In PR. The federation was not happy with him. He was pressuring a lot of things that were simply out of the CSA's budget or capability or whatever. So obviously there was already tension between Zambrano and Canada Soccer. And Herman comes in with this offer to the board of directors from the federation saying, hey, I have an offer from the English women's national team, and I'm happy to accept it unless you give it the men's team. So that was
that's how it came about. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which was, I mean, look, at the end of the day, I feel like everybody has to leverage what they got. I don't blame him. Some people would say that's pretty morally unethical. I would say it's, hey, at the end of the day, it's business.
It's a job. At the end of the day, you would, a lot of people would do that in a normal, a non-sporting walk of life and go,
exactly.
Go here.
And even if it hadn't worked out, I mean, I would still think the same way about it. I think a lot of people might not agree. I think a lot of people would have disagreed, saying, "Oh, well, it didn't work out. What a terrible hiring decision, whatnot." We go back all the progress that Canada made. So yeah, that's how it happened, and it was interesting because in January 2018, when it happened, there was a lot of shock. There was a lot of people surprised, myself included. I was like, "What the hell just happened?" But hey, I mean, but then 2 months later, I mean, the previous manager was history, and Canada was headed to Murcia, in just near Valencia kind of area, to play against a friendly against New Zealand, and then they ended up winning that friendly, and that's when a lot of younger players got called up. So in the early stages, Herman faced a lot of adversity, and obviously coming from the women's game, a lot of people doubted that, hey, can he coach in the men's world? Besides the women's, the women's national team for Canada, what else has he done? Because obviously before he had come from the New Zealand women's program, and then before he was also with Sunderland Academy. So he had still yet to coach. He's actually still yet to coach professional in the men's game, or the women's game. He hasn't coached a club, is what I'm trying to say. So a lot of people kind of doubted him, like he doesn't have the CV and stuff like that. But I'm sure he's going to get a lot of good offers. I'm sure in January. Will he take them? I mean, that's a great debate.
I mean, because international manager, I guess, requires a different skill set and a different remit to what you would do in club management. So yeah, I think from what I've observed, especially from watching women's football over the years, it's not a surprise his stock has risen as high as it has, and I think England certainly could have done with him, but they hired Phil Neville instead. But that's a whole separate conversation. So in terms of Qatar, then obviously you're at the tournament. Give us in layman's terms, what 2 or 3 players should you be looking out for? I suspect a couple of them might be obvious, but what players should the general public be looking out for when watching Canada? Who do you think will shine in Qatar?
So this is the tournament of Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David. You're talking about 2 players. Davies being, I would say, arguably the best player in his position in the world, the best left back.
Yeah, I would argue against it.
And for Jonathan David specifically as well, besides Haaland, he is, in terms of age, he is the next goal scorer in the top five. I believe he's fifth or sixth currently in the top five. And last time I checked, he was tied with Neymar as well, and more goals than Messi and Mbappe. So very, very talented player. I think him, but those two, I think they will. The thing is, they'll already announced themselves to the world. I think it's tough to, unless you're a casual football fan, it's really hard for you not to know who they are, or at least watch
No,
them once
very
or
fair
twice.
point. Yeah.
But a lot of people don't watch the Bundesliga. A lot of people don't watch Liga. So clearly, this is kind of like, oh, well, I'll watch Belgium and watch Croatia because obviously Belgium finished third place. Croatia was a runner-up. So they'll watch those two teams, and then I think if David and Davies can impress, I think they can have a breakout tournament. Those two guys. The other player who I would say can definitely break through, I think I already mentioned him. I did, yes. Eustachio, he's such a special player. He was arguably Canada's best player in the World Cup qualifying. He's not Canada's best player, obviously, but he is very, very important to the midfield. And I would say that maybe Porto are going to have some tough time keeping him, because I think he's been so good for them. He just debuted in the Champions League and just scored in his second or third game. So he is playing, extremely confident. And I think that, again, a team in the top five leagues in Spain or whatever, I think a team that's fourth, fifth in Spain, or a team that's fourth, fifth in Germany or France, I think they could sweep him up, easily. Pay his release clause or whatever, and it's funny just because Eustachio just signed for Porto, so he literally.
But Porto are a club that I guess a whole model is based on buy him low, sell him high, and I guess if he has a good World Cup, his value will skyrocket.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that could end up being a beneficial time for everybody involved. And so in terms of obviously Canada, looking at their group, what constitutes a successful tournament for Canada? Where do you feel the expectation is in terms of the group and where you expect to progress or finish?
Yeah, I would say so. I'll give you my most optimistic answer. I would say Canada will be the new Costa Rica
Oh yeah.
because at the end of the day, it just feels that Canada are getting better every single window, and at the end of the day, like the whole 2-3 year process when like these players have gone so used to each other that they finished first place in their own region, which nobody expected them to do, and then obviously they win and face the team in the World Cup, the host, obviously Qatar, ended up beating them, and obviously Qatar are the worst team, not the worst team, but one of the lesser ranked teams in FIFA rankings. So at least that was kind of expected in a way, or at least it was kind of the first big task. Okay, Canada's first time against a non-CONCACAF opponent. What can they do? They go out and beat them 2-0. But then the real task came against Uruguay, and then when they lost to Uruguay 2-0. But if it wasn't for one defensive mistake and then one counterattack error as well, they could have definitely even beat them. There was a shot earlier in that second half where it was pretty close to getting in. So I would say that best case scenario, I think Canada could. I mean, I think ESPN FC had one panelist telling them that they could be at the quarterfinals. It's possible. It's possible. I wouldn't doubt it. I would say that they could definitely get to the quarterfinals, round of 16 for sure. Worst case scenario, I'd say Canada loses against Belgium and Croatia, draws or wins against Morocco, but by then it's too late, and then they kind of they're eliminated. But as long as they can keep it a 1 or 2 goal game and have a strong performance, actually compete, I would say that's enough. A lot of fans.
So I guess going to sort of the second part of things, in terms of your views of the tournament as a whole, who do you think is going to ultimately be lifting the trophy come the end of the tournament?
I gotta go with Argentina. 35 game beating streak, or unbeaten streak. They're on fire right now at the moment. although they are, right now they have 6 players that are injured or could be injured by the start of the tournament. So that's something to keep an eye on. But Argentina's form has been incredible. Messi is in the confidence of his life.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Messi didn't really win them the Copa America. It was Angel Di Maria, but at the end of the day, this team is playing like a team, and I think that's what lacked a lot of the previous World Cups, 2018, 2014, 2010. The teams, that Argentina had didn't play like a team. They played for Messi, and I feel like now they're finally playing as a team, and it's also shown that the Argentine player, at the end of the day, I think the biggest issue with Argentina in the previous World Cups is they had so many stars, that it was very tough to kind of, okay, guys, let's make a team. It reminds me a lot like when Brazil's 98 team, they tried to play, there's a term in Brazilian Portuguese. It's gaguinja. It's kind of like how you when you have so many talented players, everyone just tries to play on themselves, and that's just like, I think that Argentina now has good players, Rodrigo de Paul, good players, good players, but they don't have stars. Besides Messi, there's no stars,
Yeah.
Emilio Martinez is a good keeper,
but he's not a world-renowned.
Yeah, but he's
player,
he's not a Jan Oblak, for example. You know what I mean? So just to give you examples, to go on the list, like Lo Celso, good player, but he's not like, let's be honest, he's not Paul Pogba, So just to give you an example, so Argentina is playing like a team. I think that's the most important thing. I think Argentina can really surprise people. Brazil's very, very good. But I think Argentina will take it. And I think France will, fall into that World Cup curse where, I think they're gonna, get too confident in the group stage and could bounce out. But I would go with Argentina and Brazil. England not too far behind them, but I think Argentina takes it.
And in terms of obviously going to more like the individual players side of things, so who do you think is going to be the top scorer or the golden boots? So which player do you think would be handed that at the end of the tournament?
Well, that's a great question, because I think that Benzema, he, right now with the Ballon d'Or, which is so deservedly won, finally, after being in the shadows of Cristiano Ronaldo, even, the likes of Luka Modric, Toni Kroos, Casemiro, like he, never won anything individually, I'm saying, like an award. And then obviously all those players had to leave Real Madrid for him to finally make it the spotlight his own. So happy that he's back with the French national team. After,
it was about 6 years. I think he wasn't
exactly
part of it for varying reasons, mostly off the pitch ones. But yeah,
correct. So the fact that he's back, I mean, that's excellent. But again, I think that France will fall into that, the curse that the teams have where they get eliminated. But I mean, if they can, sweep under that curse and then they go all the way maybe to semis, Benzema can score, man. He can. I would say that he's not that far off right now in the form that he's in right now currently, and it's crazy because he's getting older and older. But it's like a fine wine.
Okay, so we've got Karim Benzema then as a potential top scorer, and I think going into, I guess, the other part of it, what team do you think will be the dark horse? If you're not, or a surprise package of the tournament.
Besides Canada,
yeah.
Yeah, I think Canada can. I think Canada can and could be the story of the World Cup in that dark horse conversation. I think that. But besides Canada, there's a lot of good teams. There's a very lot of good teams. That's the thing. It's like, they have the potential to, but they're not necessarily going to, in my opinion. But, the U.S., I think you have such a talented young team. You have the likes of Pulisic, Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams. You have such a talented, young players playing in top 5 leagues. I think on paper, I mean, they should be able to surprise people, but I mean, they just tied, to Saudi Arabia, and they just lost to Japan. So, they're not in a good place right now. On paper, they should surprise people, but that's one name to maybe keep an eye on. As far as other teams go, in other groups, it's that's the thing. It's like surprising. It's kind of a big war, because do you really expect something from? You always expect teams like Uruguay to make it through. You expect most of the European teams, even other teams, maybe like Mexico, who have made it in the round of 16 for the past 5 World Cups.
Yeah, because they've never made it. They've always seemed to fall. They always seem to get really difficult draws in the round of 16, and then never progress any further. They've always been quite entertaining to watch. Yeah, and in terms of obviously the overall tournament, obviously we've discussed that Karim Benzema as being the choice for the Golden Boot. Sometimes they could often be the same player, but who do you think will be awarded the Best Player award, or which player do you think we'll look back on and think, yeah, they sort of ran the tournament, I suppose?
Yeah, no, it's I would say probably similar to what the players I told you. I think it will kind of depend on who's really healthy, because I know there's a lot of 18 days to the World Cup. There's a lot of ifs and maybes. They're still deciding their final 26-man rosters. We didn't even talk about Gareth Bale in Wales, and then that's the kind of the other thing that teams like this can also go under the radar. Lewandowski, I think, like, if it had to do based on individual quality and not the national team that you represent, I think Lewandowski. But again, I mean, that's the other thing is that Poland will not make it far, and I don't think the past. Correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, but I don't think the past they've given this award to players whose teams got eliminated either in the group stage or the round of 16. So.
Yeah, I think I think you're right. It'd be more of like the player that goes got far of the tournament. Well, thank you for ever so much for your time. It's been great talking about Canada and the tournament as a whole. I wish Canada the best of luck in the tournament. I hope it goes really well.